What if the best way to stop weeds wasn't mulch, landscape fabric, or hours of pulling them by hand? Certain ground covers naturally spread across the soil, forming dense, living carpets that block sunlight and leave weeds with little chance to grow. As they mature, they conserve moisture, reduce erosion, improve soil health, attract pollinators, and replace traditional mulch with beautiful, low-maintenance greenery. Instead of constantly fighting weeds, imagine a garden covered with colorful flowers and lush foliage that does the work for you. In this video, we'll introduce 7 amazing flowering ground covers that act as living mulch, creating dense coverage that naturally keeps weeds under control while making your garden healthier and more beautiful. 1. Sweet woodruff, one of the best living mulches for shade. Many ground covers struggle in places where sunlight is limited, but sweet woodruff performs beautifully in exactly those challenging conditions. If you have difficult areas beneath mature trees, alongside fences, next to buildings, or in shady corners where weeds seem to thrive because grass refuses to grow, this elegant perennial can completely change the way those spaces look and function. Sweet woodruff gradually spreads into a lush carpet of soft green foliage that completely transforms bare ground. Its leaves grow in attractive circular whorls around delicate, upright stems, producing overlapping layers of greenery that shade the soil below. As the plant thickens over time, very little sunlight reaches the surface, making it extremely difficult for weed seeds to germinate and establish themselves. Below ground, sweet woodruff quietly expands through shallow roots and underground stems. Rather than aggressively invading nearby plants, it gently weaves through open spaces, filling gaps while peacefully coexisting with neighboring trees, shrubs, and perennials. This gentle spreading habit makes it especially valuable beneath mature trees, where grass often struggles and conventional mulch must constantly be replaced. Spring brings another beautiful surprise. Clusters of tiny white star-shaped flowers rise above the foliage, brightening dark woodland areas with delicate blooms that appear to float above the green carpet. Their soft, airy appearance gives shaded gardens a peaceful woodland atmosphere that few other ground covers can match. Sweet woodruff is also famous for its fragrance. While actively growing, the foliage has a clean, fresh scent, but once harvested and dried, the leaves develop a rich aroma often compared to vanilla, sweet hay, or almonds. For centuries, this pleasant fragrance made the plant popular for scenting linens, homes, wardrobes, and even traditional beverages throughout Europe. This woodland perennial performs best in partial to full shade and prefers rich soil containing plenty of organic matter, much like the forest floor where it naturally grows. Although regular moisture helps young plants establish themselves, mature patches tolerate dry periods surprisingly well because shaded soil loses moisture much more slowly. Unlike bark mulch or wood chips that eventually break down, fade, or wash away, sweet woodruff constantly renews itself. Year after year, it continues spreading, cooling the soil, reducing evaporation, feeding beneficial organisms beneath the surface, and gradually improving soil quality as older leaves naturally decompose into organic matter. For hundreds of years, gardeners have planted sweet woodruff in monastery gardens, woodland landscapes, and traditional European gardens because of its outstanding ability to suppress weeds while creating beautiful, low-maintenance ground cover. Once fully established, it requires remarkably little attention. It rarely needs extra watering, never requires mowing, and steadily fills empty spaces on its own. Should it eventually spread beyond where you want it, controlling it is relatively easy thanks to its shallow root system. Instead of constantly fighting weeds in shaded areas, sweet woodruff quietly solves the problem by replacing bare soil with a beautiful living carpet that remains attractive throughout the growing season. 2. Creeping jenny, the ground cover that covers every inch. When it comes to preventing weeds, creeping jenny doesn't simply compete, it completely blankets the soil. As it grows, it produces long trailing stems that spread rapidly in every direction. Wherever those stems touch the ground, they develop fresh roots and produce new plants. Before long, individual stems become connected into one continuous network that covers almost every exposed section of soil. Its small, rounded leaves are one of its most recognizable features. In bright sunlight, they develop a brilliant golden yellow color that instantly brightens garden beds and contrasts beautifully with darker shrubs and flowers. In areas with partial shade, the foliage turns a richer green while remaining just as healthy and dense. During late spring and early summer, cheerful yellow flowers appear among the leaves, adding another layer of beauty to the landscape. The reason creeping jenny performs so well as living mulch is simple. It leaves virtually no bare ground exposed. Its dense foliage blocks sunlight from reaching the soil surface, preventing many weed seeds from germinating while gradually weakening weeds that have already appeared. This makes it especially useful in places where traditional mulch often struggles to stay in place. Hillsides and sloping gardens are excellent examples. Rain frequently washes bark mulch or straw downhill, exposing bare soil once again. Creeping jenny, however, remains firmly rooted. Its interconnected stems stabilize the soil, reduce erosion, conserve moisture, and continue protecting the ground regardless of heavy rainfall. The plant also thrives in damp conditions where many other ground covers struggle. It performs exceptionally well around ponds, water features, drainage areas, rain gardens, and consistently moist planting beds, making it one of the most dependable choices for wet locations. Another major advantage is its adaptability. Creeping jenny grows successfully in both full sun and partial shade while tolerating a wide variety of soil types. Once established, it requires surprisingly little care. Occasional trimming may be necessary where growth becomes especially vigorous, but in larger landscapes, it can simply be allowed to spread naturally. Its vigorous growth makes it an outstanding option beneath shrubs, alongside pathways, cascading over retaining walls, or filling large planting beds where complete soil coverage is desired. In these situations, creeping jenny often performs even better than conventional mulch by simultaneously cooling the soil, retaining moisture, reducing erosion, and preventing weeds. For gardeners searching for a colorful, fast-growing living mulch that establishes quickly and provides outstanding weed suppression, creeping jenny remains one of the finest ground covers available. 3. Ajuga bugleweed, a colorful carpet that leaves little room for weeds. Ajuga may seem fairly modest when first planted, but once it settles into the garden, it quickly demonstrates why it has become one of the most trusted living mulches for difficult landscapes. This attractive perennial spreads by producing creeping runners that travel across the soil surface. Every point where a runner touches the ground develops into another leafy rosette. Over time, hundreds of these individual plants connect together into one dense carpet that covers exposed soil so completely that weeds struggle to find enough light or space to survive. One of Ajuga's greatest attractions is its remarkable foliage. Even outside the flowering season, the leaves provide rich color and texture throughout the landscape. Depending on the variety, the foliage may appear deep green, bronze, burgundy, rich purple, nearly black, or beautifully variegated with silver highlights. This colorful ground cover remains ornamental throughout much of the year, ensuring the garden stays attractive long after flowering ends. Spring brings an even more impressive display. Tall flower spikes emerge above the foliage carrying clusters of blue, violet, or pink blossoms that stand out beautifully against the darker leaves below. These flowers are highly attractive to bees and many other pollinating insects. Because Ajuga blooms early in the growing season, it supplies valuable nectar at a time when many other flowering plants are only beginning to wake from winter dormancy. Ajuga's ability to suppress weeds comes from the sheer density of its foliage. As the carpet thickens, very little sunlight reaches the soil below, making it difficult for weed seeds to germinate while weakening any weeds that attempt to grow through the canopy. The plant performs especially well in partial shade, making it an excellent choice beneath trees, alongside shaded pathways, or in difficult locations where grass struggles to survive. Given adequate moisture, it also performs well in full sun. It adapts easily to compacted soils, uneven ground, and locations where many other ground covers fail. Ajuga is particularly valuable for hillsides and embankments. Traditional mulch often washes away after heavy rain, exposing bare soil and increasing erosion. Ajuga naturally solves both problems. Its spreading runners anchor the soil securely while creating a durable living surface that protects the ground throughout every season. Another reason gardeners appreciate Ajuga is its remarkably low maintenance. Once established, it generally requires very little watering, fertilization, or ongoing care. If it eventually spreads beyond its intended area, its shallow root system allows it to be trimmed or thinned without much difficulty. Plant it once, allow it time to establish itself, and Ajuga begins doing much of the work on its own. It fills empty spaces, blocks weeds, supports beneficial pollinators, protects the soil, and transforms difficult garden areas into attractive, low-maintenance landscapes. Ajuga is far more than just another ornamental perennial. It is a dependable, long-lasting living mulch that combines beauty, durability, weed suppression, and ecological value into one remarkably useful ground cover. 4. Creeping thyme, a beautiful ground cover that naturally replaces traditional mulch. Very few ground cover plants combine beauty, practicality, fragrance, and outstanding weed control as successfully as creeping thyme. If you're searching for a living alternative to bark mulch or wood chips, this hardy perennial is one of the finest options you can choose. Instead of simply covering the soil, it creates a vibrant green carpet that helps protect the garden while adding color and fragrance throughout the growing season. Rather than growing tall, creeping thyme spreads horizontally, gradually carpeting the ground with dense evergreen foliage. As its slender stems continue to grow, they naturally root wherever they touch the soil, allowing the plant to slowly expand outward in every direction. Over time, these rooted stems connect together to form a thick living mat that almost completely covers exposed soil. Because very little sunlight is able to reach the surface beneath the foliage, weed seeds struggle to sprout, while existing weeds find it increasingly difficult to survive. Its compact growth habit makes creeping thyme incredibly versatile. Since it usually grows only a few inches high, it fits perfectly into places where taller plants would overwhelm the landscape. It performs exceptionally well between stepping stones, beside garden walkways, along borders, throughout rock gardens, across gentle slopes, and even in narrow spaces where grass refuses to grow properly. Unlike a traditional lawn, creeping thyme never needs mowing, and unlike wood mulch, it doesn't need to be replaced every year. As spring gives way to early summer, the plant becomes even more spectacular. The entire carpet of foliage is blanketed with thousands of tiny blossoms in shades of lavender, soft pink, and light purple. What was once simply green ground suddenly transforms into a colorful flowering blanket that adds beauty and charm to every corner of the garden. These delicate flowers do much more than improve the landscape. They provide an abundant source of nectar that attracts bees, butterflies, and countless other beneficial pollinators. As a result, creeping thyme not only suppresses weeds but also helps support a healthier and more diverse garden ecosystem. Another reason gardeners love creeping thyme is its pleasant fragrance. Whenever the foliage is brushed with your hand or gently stepped on, it releases a refreshing herbal aroma into the air. This natural scent makes it especially appealing around patios, seating areas, entrances, walkways, and other places where people spend time outdoors. Creeping thyme grows best in sunny locations with well-drained soil. In fact, it often performs better in sandy, rocky, or relatively poor soils than in overly fertile ground. Rich soil and excessive fertilization tend to encourage taller, looser growth, reducing the dense coverage that makes the plant such an effective natural mulch. Once the plant becomes established, it develops excellent drought tolerance and usually requires very little additional watering. Overall maintenance is remarkably simple. There's no need for mowing, frequent fertilizing, or replacing mulch every season. If the plant eventually spreads beyond its intended space, occasional trimming is generally all that is needed to keep it under control. Instead of pulling weeds after they appear, creeping thyme prevents many of them from growing in the first place by occupying the available space before weeds have the opportunity to establish themselves. Wherever it forms a thick carpet, unwanted plants find very few opportunities to compete. Creeping thyme perfectly demonstrates one of gardening's most valuable lessons. Sometimes the smartest way to eliminate weeds isn't by fighting them over and over again, but by replacing bare soil with beautiful plants that naturally do the job for you. 5. Sedum, stone crop. A tough ground cover that thrives where others fail. If your garden receives intense sunshine, has rocky ground, dry soil, or areas where very few plants seem willing to grow, sedum may be one of the most dependable living mulches you can plant. Rather than relying only on rapid growth to suppress weeds, sedum succeeds because of its incredible toughness, outstanding drought tolerance, and ability to form long-lasting ground cover that protects the soil throughout the year. As a succulent, sedum stores water inside its thick, fleshy leaves, allowing it to survive long periods without rainfall. Heat, drought, sandy soil, poor fertility, and general neglect rarely slow it down. In fact, many of the harsh conditions that cause other plants to struggle are exactly the environments where sedum performs at its best. Low-growing varieties slowly spread across the soil surface, gradually forming dense mats of foliage that function as a natural barrier. As these mats expand, they shade the ground beneath them, preventing sunlight from reaching weed seeds. Without sufficient light, many weed seeds fail to germinate, while those that do emerge often struggle because very little moisture, space, or sunlight remains available. One of sedum's greatest strengths is its adaptability. Although it thrives in full sun and well-drained soil, it also tolerates many difficult growing conditions with very little assistance. Gravel beds, rocky landscapes, dry borders, and areas with thin soil are often ideal locations. Interestingly, soil that is too rich may actually reduce its effectiveness by encouraging taller, looser growth instead of the dense, weed-blocking carpet gardeners are looking for. During summer and continuing into autumn, sedum becomes even more attractive. Clusters of small star-shaped flowers appear above the foliage in shades ranging from white and yellow to pink, red, and deep rose. These colorful blooms brighten the landscape while attracting bees, butterflies, and many other beneficial pollinators that help support a healthy garden. Sedum performs exceptionally well in locations where traditional mulch often struggles to stay in place. Rock gardens, gravel landscapes, hillsides, slopes, dry borders, rooftop gardens, driveways, and pathways all benefit from its ability to remain firmly rooted. Unlike bark mulch that can decompose, shift, or wash away during heavy rain, sedum stays securely anchored while its expanding roots stabilize the soil, reduce erosion, conserve moisture, and regulate soil temperatures. After becoming established, sedum requires remarkably little care. Watering is rarely necessary, fertilizer is seldom required, and the plant naturally resists many common pests and diseases. Unlike conventional mulch, it never needs seasonal replacement. Year after year, it simply continues spreading, protecting the soil and improving the appearance of the garden. For gardeners searching for a beautiful, durable, and low-maintenance solution to weed control, sedum remains one of the most reliable living mulches available. 6. Vinca minor, evergreen ground cover that keeps weeds away all year. If you're looking for a ground cover that stays attractive throughout the year, performs beautifully in shade, and asks for very little maintenance, Vinca minor deserves serious consideration. This evergreen perennial doesn't simply reduce weeds, it creates conditions where weeds struggle to survive from the very beginning. Vinca spreads by producing trailing stems that slowly creep across the ground. Whenever one of these stems touches the soil, it develops new roots and begins forming another plant. As this process repeats itself, an extensive network of interconnected stems gradually develops, covering the ground with a thick evergreen carpet that leaves very little exposed soil where weeds can gain a foothold. One of Vinca's greatest advantages is its evergreen foliage. In many climates, the glossy green leaves remain healthy and attractive throughout all 4 seasons, providing continuous protection for the soil even during winter. Unlike many seasonal ground covers that disappear during dormancy and expose bare ground, Vinca continues shading the soil year-round, making it much harder for weeds to establish themselves. Spring adds another layer of beauty as delicate flowers begin appearing above the foliage in shades of blue, violet, and soft purple. These blossoms brighten areas that often receive little sunlight, transforming shady spaces beneath trees, along fences, beside buildings, and throughout woodland gardens into colorful displays. Vinca performs especially well in locations where many other plants struggle, including beneath mature trees with extensive root systems, on shaded slopes and embankments, throughout woodland gardens, along foundations, beside fences, and anywhere traditional mulch tends to decompose or disappear too quickly. The plant adapts easily to deep shade, partial shade, and filtered sunlight. Once established, it also becomes impressively drought-tolerant, although occasional watering helps young plants settle in more quickly. As it continues spreading, its expanding root system helps stabilize soil, reduce erosion, and protect sloped landscapes from washing away during heavy rain. Unlike certain aggressive ground covers that become difficult to manage, Vinca spreads at a steady and predictable pace. It fills available space efficiently while remaining relatively easy to control with occasional trimming whenever necessary. Maintenance requirements are extremely low. There is no need to replace mulch every season, apply fertilizer regularly, or spend hours maintaining the planting. A little trimming from time to time is generally enough to keep the plant looking neat and growing within its desired boundaries. Once fully established, vinca creates a cool, shaded layer across the soil that conserves moisture, blocks sunlight from weed seeds, and keeps the landscape attractive throughout every season of the year. Plant it once, allow it to gradually spread, and vinca can reward your garden with beautiful evergreen coverage and dependable weed suppression for decades. 7. Clover, the living ground cover that feeds the soil while keeping weeds away. Although many homeowners think of clover as nothing more than a common lawn weed, gardeners often see it very differently. In reality, clover is one of the most useful and beneficial living ground covers you can grow. Not only does it do an excellent job of suppressing weeds, but it also improves the health of the soil as it spreads, making it far more valuable than traditional mulch or many conventional lawn grasses. As clover gradually expands, it creates a thick blanket of green foliage that covers the soil surface. This living carpet shades the ground below, reducing the amount of sunlight that reaches weed seeds. As the coverage becomes denser, weeds have less room to grow, fewer resources to survive, and far fewer opportunities to establish themselves. Instead of constantly pulling unwanted plants, gardeners allow clover to naturally occupy the available space before weeds ever get the chance. However, preventing weeds is only one of the many reasons clover has become such a valuable garden plant. Unlike wood chips, gravel, landscape fabric, or other forms of mulch that simply sit on top of the soil, clover is a living plant that continuously benefits the environment around it. As a member of the legume family, it develops a unique partnership with beneficial nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live on its roots. Together, these bacteria capture nitrogen directly from the air and convert it into a form that plants can naturally use. In other words, clover doesn't simply cover the soil, it actively enriches it. This natural ability makes clover especially valuable beneath fruit trees, around berry bushes, throughout vegetable gardens, alongside pathways, and even mixed into lawns. As it continues growing, it slowly contributes nutrients back into the soil, encourages healthier surrounding plants, and gradually improves soil fertility without relying on synthetic fertilizers or expensive soil amendments. Another reason gardeners appreciate clover is its remarkable resilience. Its deep, well-developed root system allows it to tolerate drought much better than many traditional lawn grasses. During extended dry spells, clover often stays green long after ordinary grass begins turning brown. Once rain returns, it recovers quickly and resumes vigorous growth with very little assistance. Several different types of clover can be used throughout the landscape, each offering its own advantages. White clover grows low to the ground and works beautifully in lawns, pathways, and open garden spaces where a compact living carpet is desired. Red clover develops taller stems and is especially valuable for improving soil fertility while producing abundant flowers that support pollinators. Microclover remains exceptionally compact and blends naturally into ornamental gardens and modern landscapes where a more refined appearance is preferred. Unlike conventional lawns, clover requires very little mowing and greatly reduces the need for chemical fertilizers, constant reseeding, and other time-consuming maintenance tasks. Once established, it largely takes care of itself while continuing to improve the soil year after year. Its value extends far beyond weed control and soil improvement. Clover flowers produce generous amounts of nectar that attract bees, butterflies, native pollinators, and many other beneficial insects. In regions where few flowers are blooming, clover often becomes an important food source that helps support healthy pollinator populations throughout the growing season. As the plant continues spreading across the landscape, it quietly improves the soil rather than exhausting it. Organic matter gradually increases, compacted ground becomes looser and healthier, moisture is retained more effectively, and beneficial microorganisms flourish beneath the living carpet. Weeds gradually disappear, not because clover aggressively attacks them, but because it removes nearly everything they need to survive. Bare soil becomes covered, sunlight can no longer reach most weed seeds, and healthier soil supports the dense growth of clover instead of unwanted plants. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson clover teaches gardeners. The most effective way to control weeds is often not through endless pulling, spraying, or replacing mulch, but by filling the space with a living ground cover that naturally creates a healthier, greener, and far more balanced garden.